I have a CloudStack environment with one zone, one pod, two clusters, two hosts in each cluster, so 4 hosts, and a bunch of different primary storage, some of which is local, some of which is shared. Let's take a look at the clusters area and click on the Zen server cluster and click on View Hosts. We can see that we're dealing with two Zen Server 6.2 hosts. We can switch over to Zen Center and see here from another view that we have one Zen Server 6.2 host and another Zen Server 6.2 host in the same resource pool. I only have a single virtual machine in this environment. Let's take a look at the details. As I scroll down, we can see that the compute offering I used is SFCO1, SolidFire Compute Offering 1. Let's take a look at its volumes, view volumes, and we'll take a look at the data disk. As I scroll down, we can see here under the disk offering row, disk offering SFDO1, SolidFire disk offering 1. Now let's take a look at the compute offering and the disk offering that we used when I spun up that virtual machine. So SFCO1 is the disk offering. Let's drill down into that row. And we can see here that we have quality of service settings set at 500 min Iops and 1000 max Iops. In this particular case, I used a template. Let's go over to the templates area. That was 20 gigabytes. I used this one here that I'm drilling down into, and we can see 20 gigabytes. Now let's go back over to the service offerings area and take a look at the disk offering I used for the data disk. We'll switch to disk offerings. And I used SFDO1, SolidFire disk offering 1. Let's drill down into that row. We can see here a 100 gigabyte virtual disk should be created, 1500 min Iops, 3000 max Iops. Now let's take a look at this from Zen Center's point of view. I've selected the virtual machine on the left-hand side in the tree structure. On the storage tab, we see two virtual disks. I'm highlighting the root disk, which is at 20 gigabytes in size, which was the size of our template. And now I'm highlighting the data disk, which is at 100 gigabytes, which was specified in the disk offering. If we go over to the console view and log in, do a clear here, and run fdisk-l, we can see that we do in fact have a 100 gigabyte data disk and a 20 gigabyte root disk. Now let's take a look using the SolidFire GUI and confirm this information. Volume ID 7 in the second row is our root disk. This has a size of 60 gigabytes essentially, which is triple what we saw for the size of the virtual disk. This is to be expected since the hypervisor snapshot reserve was set at 200%. So what that means is take the 20 gigabytes for the virtual disk, add on 200% of that, and that would be potentially used for hypervisor snapshots, and that will arrive at the size that we actually want for the back-end volume, 60 gigabytes in this case. Same idea for the data disk. The actual virtual disk was at 100 gigabytes, but we see here, due to a 200% hypervisor snapshot reserve, the backend volume is at 300 gigabytes. So this information looks correct. Let's go over to the Quality of Service tab and take a look at our min and max Iops. The compute offerings specified for the root disk, 500 minimum Iops and 1,000 maximum, so this looks correct. And our disk offerings specified 1,500 minimum Iops and 3,000 maximum Iops, so this also looks good. Now let's say we'd like to change either the size and or the Iops for our data disk. To do this, let's go into the Service Offerings tab as an administrator and create a new disk offering. In the upper right, I'll click on Add Disk Offering. We'll give it a new name. Let's pick something like SolidFire Disk Offering 3, so SFDO3. And then let's provide, say, a minimum of 3,500 Iops and a maximum of, say, 5,000 Iops. We want to keep storage type of shared. Provisioning type does not apply in the case of SolidFire, as all SolidFire volumes are thinly provisioned. Let's go ahead now. Our previous disk offering was set at 100 gigabytes. Let's set this one at 150 gigabytes. And while we're at it, let's change the quality of service. So we're going to pick storage quality of service and making sure that we're actually consistent with what I typed in the description. I'm going to type in 3,500 minimum Iops and 5,000 maximum Iops. Now, for us to be able to change the data disk from the previous disk offering to this disk offering, we have to make sure that the hypervisor snapshot reserve field is the same in both disk offerings. The previous disk offering, SFDO1, was set at 200%, so that's what I'm going to put here, 200%. We don't have to worry about this write type cache. What we do need to make sure is that the storage tags match from the previous disk offering to the new disk offering. I'm going to type in an S and select SolidFire_A, which is the only storage tag that was in use from the disk offering that I used to create the data disk. And now I have a new disk offering. I'm going to hit the OK button to actually create it and put it in the database. Now we can go over to the storage tab and we can actually change the disk offering that underlies our data disk. So let's go over to the Quick View column, go to Resize Volume. I'm going to go to select from the drop-down our new disk offering. And I'll point out ahead of time here that our virtual machine that is making use of this data disk is actually running. And that will not be allowed to change its size at runtime. We'll actually have to shut the virtual machine down. But let's see the failure, just as an informational piece. Okay, so the VM must be stopped or the disk detached in order to resize with the Zen Server hypervisor. Okay, that is fine. We'll hit the close button. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh that storage tab. And perhaps the simplest here for my situation is just to detach that data disk. So I'm going to go over to the Quick View column, click on Detach Disk, say yes. While I'm at it, I'm going to switch over to Zen Center just to watch the SR that houses this virtual disk disappear. And there it goes. If we look back in CloudStack in a moment, we should see that the detach was successful. There we are. Now we can go ahead and reissue that resize command. Let's go and resize the volume again, pick our new disk offering, hit the OK button, and this time everything should work as expected. Once this operation completes, let's go ahead and take a look on the SolidFire SAN and see what changed. I'll switch over to the SolidFire GUI. This is our old information. I have to refresh in order to see the new information. When I do refresh, we're going to expect to see 3,500 min Iops, 5,000 max Iops. And here we are, 3,500 and 5,000. Let's switch back to the volume overview. We can see that this particular volume, because I detached it from the virtual machine, is no longer in a volume access group. It'll go back in a volume access group when I attach it to the VM in a moment. Now, the total size has not changed. The actual back-end SolidFire volume size has not changed as a result of this operation. What has changed, and we'll see this in a moment, is that the virtual disk has gone from 100 gigabytes to 150 gigabytes. So let's go ahead and reattach that virtual disk right now. We'll go over to the Quick View column, attach disk. That's the VM. Hit the OK button, and just kind of to watch this unfold, let's go over to Zen Center. In a moment, we'll see a new storage repository appear. It's being probed right now. It will actually disappear for a moment and then reappear, and then the virtual disk within the storage repository will be attached to our virtual machine. As soon as this appears again, I'm going to click on it and switch over to the storage tab. We're going to see that the size was 100 gigabytes, and then it'll go up to 150 gigabytes. There we are, 100 gigabytes, then going up to 150 gigabytes. Now we can see in the virtual machine column that this virtual disk has in fact been attached to the virtual machine that we were expecting it to be attached to. Let's go and select that virtual machine. We're back in the console view. This is old information stating that the data disk is 100 gigabytes and the root disk is 20 gigabytes. If I go ahead and clear out this information and rerun fdisk-l, we'll see that the root disk size is the same, but the data disk is now at 150 gigabytes. So we can see here, now at the top, the root disk happens to be displayed first. It's at 20 gigabytes. And then the data disk below it is at 150 gigabytes. Now let's take a look from CloudStack's point of view. We'll drill down into data-6, which is our data disk. We can see that the disk offering has been changed. It's now using SFDO3 instead of SFDO1. And our Iops, well, that's actually part of our description, but that is what we should expect to see for the minimum and maximum Iops below. And in fact, we do see 3,500 and 5,000 respectively. The size is now set at 150 gigabytes. So the point to keep in mind when you change the size and the Iops for a virtual disk that's using the SolidFire plugin is that the size is in reference to the virtual disk. The Iops is in reference to the SolidFire volume. So when you do increase or potentially decrease the size of your data disk, you will be increasing or decreasing, if it's allowed by your hypervisor to decrease, the size of your virtual disk. And then the Iops are something that is handled on the SolidFire side, as you would expect, since quality of service is maintained on the storage area network.